Welcome into the show tonight. We talk about Auburn's tough 41-38 home loss to Texas A&M. We look ahead to the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Auburn and Georgia set to face off this Saturday. In our film session, we break down 3 critical plays that allowed Auburn to lose to Texas A&M. All that and more on Auburn Intel. Auburn was a 3-touchdown favorite, and nobody outside of College Station expected a Texas A&M, but that's exactly what happened inside Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday evening. Auburn's 14-game home winning streak under Gus Malzahn came to an end with a 41-38 loss to the Aggies. Despite nearly 600 total yards and 360 yards rushing, Auburn lost 3 fumbles and watched their college football playoff hopes likely slip away. Guys, heartbreaking loss for Auburn, and honestly, it was kind of a taste of what Ole Miss felt like a week ago. I mean, it was almost identical. 2 fumbles at the very end, back-to-back. Right. In a game, your best receiver gets hurt. It was something Auburn's normally on the other end, and they felt the sting of a loss that they probably felt like they should have won. What'd you think?
The first thing I said was, man, this is what it feels like to be a Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss fan.
Yeah.
So I thought it. Well, you know me. You know my disdain for. You know what I'm going to say.
Freshman quarterback.
When an inexperienced quarterback comes in and we make them look like a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Yeah.
We have made a habit of doing that. It sickens me. I'm sick of it. I hate it. I can't stand watching it. And as soon as they drove down there and scored, I had written in a column before this game happened, no way this game goes into the fourth quarter. As soon as it happened, I looked at him and I told him, this is now a 4-quarter football game because you just gave him a shot, an IV of confidence at that moment, and he carried it through the whole first half and dug ourselves a hole we couldn't get out of.
Again, it was a tale of 2 halves. I mean, we did put ourselves in position to win after looking like we were almost out of the game at times early, and it sort of led us to believe that there's no way that we won't turn our adversity into success somehow. The difference being that the consistency of the quarterback that we've just totally relied on was not there. I mean, and no discredit to Nick, because I think as much of him today as I did last week, but he almost has to play perfect, it looks like, for us to win, and I think he played one of his worst games since he's been there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he certainly pressed. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and I think that has everything to do with the fact that he saw what was going on the other side of the football and felt the weight of that. We've got to score every time we go out, and that's no situation to be in. That's not helping your teammate. That's not carrying your load. Anytime you put 38 points on the board, you should win. You've done your part. And so I can't really point at Nick, although Coach is right. He did make some questionable decisions under duress. Yeah. But I got to point the finger at the defense at this one and say you got to do your job.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're sliding offensively. I just think that was the elements of that game. On the other side of the ball, I think we are in a slide, and it seems like we've been aware of it. We just hadn't been able to reverse it because our play, I think, has steadily deteriorated.
And we don't know why. We just keep hearing confusion, miscommunication, and it's missed tackles. I will say that 11 missed tackles for 114 yards. That's a quarter of their yards.
I still think the defense would be a lot different if they had one guy that pressure that freshman quarterback. Yeah. And I think what it gets us into defensively is like the hole in the dam. And then, we end up bringing a lot more pressure, playing a lot more man. And Rob and I said it, when we played zone, we didn't know how to play zone. One reason we didn't know how to play zone is we played so bad, you got to play zone a lot to be really good
Right.
at zone. We're back there in spots, but we're not finding receivers.
Why didn't they know? You bring up the pass rush. Carl Lawson's been hurt since the spring. This isn't something new. He knows that that D Ford's not out
what's
there.
different is that there's a pattern that people are beginning to get up on. Now, and you said this. These people had 3 weeks. There's not a doubt in my mind that where their personnel were and how they used them in this game was to some degree different than everything we had seen and planned for on film. And that is somewhat disconcerting. But that's what happens when you get targeted 3 weeks ahead of time.
Yeah.
You got an open week, you got somebody, and how bad did they play against Louisiana Monroe? That should have told us how much they worked on Auburn.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I had forgotten about and I had mentioned. But them, like South Carolina, they had a bye, and then La Monroe, they've been looking at Auburn for 3 weeks.
And I'll tell you now, there's a lot of athletes out there.
Yeah.
A lot of athletes.
They look good.
Yeah.
When we get back, we're going to break down 3 big plays in the Auburn-Texas A&M game on Auburn Intel. Welcome back into Auburn Intel. This is our film session. We like to break down 3 key plays from the game that happened on Saturday. Tonight we're gonna look at 3 important plays that happened in the Auburn-Texas A&M game. 2 went against Auburn. 1 went for Auburn in the 41-38 loss to Texas A&M. Guys, I think the first play I wanted to look at was Texas A&M's very first touchdown, only because it was just such a busted coverage. It was a play that happened and you thought, what just happened? Because this guy just runs free. Describe what we're looking at. This is barely, not even 2 minutes into the football game.
2nd 5.
Yeah, and I set it up originally. I mean, you can tell right off the bat that we've given away what it is we're going to do. Our intention is that we're playing man-to-man. How do I know that? He's looking straight at him. How do I know that? He's looking straight at him. They're all looking at their man.
Right.
Just go down the line, draw imaginary lines. That's who has who. And when you watch how this play unfolds, you'll see who doesn't take the man he's supposed to take.
He lines up and takes him, but what if, I don't know how well you can see it, but you see his head starts going back and forth. When you got man, your eyes are on your man. He actually gets distracted by this bubble, comes off to tackle that man's man, which turns his man loose. This safety has that back man to man,
Right.
which means he got no help.
What's going to
We're
happen?
bringing everybody. We're bringing the house.
Let's go ahead and run it, and people can see exactly what happens. And this is the guy that catches the touchdown, this
Yeah.
middle receiver. So go ahead and
And
run it, and
Threesy's
you'll
on
see
it.
it open.
Threesy turns him loose.
And there he goes.
And notice that.
And he ran a good route. He was a little slow, like he was going to block, and then he went right by
In
him.
the first 2
There
plays
is a
of
little deception
the
there.
first 2 plays of the game, they completed that bubble route, and so
Right.
they came back on the 3rd time and they actually fake the bubble and go straight to this guy. And the only way that Threesy is not in the wrong on this one is if this play side safety has looked down to him and says, "Look, let's bracket these 2 guys." If they are supposed to bracket these 2 guys, then he would have the first guy that releases outside, and he would switch off the guy that runs the inside route to the inside defender here.
Which I think is unlikely.
But that doesn't look like
Just
that's the
because
case.
of his alignment, Rob, I think he's aligned almost a yard inside if you use that hash mark, point of reference, and if you're bracketing, you usually line up outside.
And the other thing that sort of shatters that argument is that he comes screaming down
Oh,
here
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
and then this guy who a lot of times we end up playing man free. As soon as this running back goes the opposite way, he comes attacking down in here as well. So it's man to man across the board.
And
with
that
his
hurt him
blower.
as well, that little action. It's just it's a well-designed play and some undiscipline from
It's
Auburn.
well designed, but it shows you the
It
lack
took
of discipline.
advantage. It took advantage.
Like an eye discipline. I think Threesy's a great player.
I do too.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
roll it
I
one more
think-
time and you'll see everything we just did.
But
And
I
he goes
think
right
his
by.
head is moving around way too much to be playing man coverage, and his eyes are moving with his helmet. And he took his eyes off his man, thought he could jump the bubble route, and
But
paid a price.
less than a minute and a half in the game, you're down
Yeah.
by 7. You've given a true freshman quarterback
Yeah.
all the confidence in the
That
world.
that did enormously help the conference.
And that's where we're
that
talking about
quarterback.
coaching. I mean, they saw Auburn, they like to take man. They can sometimes be undisciplined. So we're going to come out, run bubble, and then run right by them. I mean, it was
did.
right off the
Good
bat. So
plan.
if that happened third quarter, okay, maybe they saw something that developed.
Right.
For that to happen on the 3rd or 4th play of the game, you knew they saw it in
means
film. They
it
were
was
planning
scripted.
on it. Exactly.
And know this, that if Threesy had gone back with that man, he would have thrown the bubble.
Right, though, the bubble. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Make the test. So it's a good play, but
Yeah.
it's not a
And
50,
it's not
61-yard
It's not
touchdown.
a pick a guy out and throw it.
Yeah.
It was a read by the quarterback, and give him credit. But again, they had a series of plays.
Yeah.
And this was the clincher.
Yeah,
But again, they had 3 weeks to get ready to play.
yeah.
and I'm not sure that maybe we've seen this combination.
Yeah, I'll bring up
Obviously,
the next
hadn't
play.
seen it enough.
Bring up the next play. A good one for Auburn. First play of the fourth quarter. Nick Marshall to Quan Bray, 31 yards. Really a simple play. Quan Bray's up here at the top, and he just runs a stop and go. Auburn gets him in a good look. You've got Samey down here. You got a safety. You got Izuma, and it's really just a simple stop and go. Great route by Quan and perfect throw by Nick. It's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, they have. The key was, I guess, them not having. If they have a safety back,
They
they can
bracketed
get there, right?
what Rob was talking about, bracketing number 2.
Right.
That's what they do here. They're
Right.
lined up outside, and they're going to bracket. The reason you bracket is because we're a perimeter running football team, and you can play a combination of man and still be able to keep outside leverage. So they bracketed, as Rob was talking about, Uzama.
Go ahead and
There's
roll
no help for the corner. All he's got to
And
do.
up top, boom, little stop and go,
Yeah,
runs right by
yeah.
him. Great throw.
Yeah.
Good route, great throw, a great catch, and it pulls Auburn right back into
And
it.
Quan Bray getting one of those guys who's getting better and better. I mean, now he's a downfield, running good routes.
And I mentioned earlier in the show, I don't know how all this maybe all stacks up, about how quickly we make adjustments on the sideline offensively, which is not necessarily what we do defensively. A hitch and go like that, you don't put that in the game plan to run on. You watch how they're playing,
Yeah.
and you actually pick that kind of play up on the sideline by Damon Craig
And Rhett
looking,
Lashley,
how quickly they're jumping these routes.
And that's what they do. Rhett literally will stand down here and he
Right.
watches the safeties. This
Right.
is here's what they're doing, and so they
They've
know what
got
to do.
so many eyes capturing information and getting it to Gus so quick during the game that we actually make a judge. That is a in the moment call. There's nothing to that. Everybody's
go ahead and roll
got
this
it.
and we'll go on to the next one. Yeah,
Everybody's
last time.
got it. It's not a matter of anything other than just calling it at the right time.
Great route to Quan Bray. Auburn back in the football game for a touchdown. That leads us to the last play, which is going to be tough to watch, but it's important to just watch it one more time. That the final, I guess it was really the second fumble, not the last fumble. There we are, 2.5 minutes. Auburn's going to walk in to take the lead, and what never happens is a fumble on the mesh point.
It's called a ride to side hang because he hung it. You saw him get that little jerk in there because he let it go past his hip. As Rob is him, of course, it's the opposite side. When it gets past my hip, it starts coming out, and at that point, Cap squeezed it, sort of jerked it, and they get pulled away from each other. That is the quarterback's mistake. That's not Cap's mistake.
And the biggest thing for me, Cameron Artis-Payne had 30 carries, 221 2 and 2 touchdowns.
No reason to pull it out.
Just give him the ball, let him get in the end zone.
And really, look, Gus and them are great, but it should have just been a call to give. I mean, they called a read, and so I can't blame Nick because they called a read. Gus said it was a read.
Well,
he admitted it.
Well, look at this. That
he
guy's
said we
blocked,
called
that
his
guy's
own
blocked, that guy's blocked.
He's saying there's nobody to read.
There's nobody to read,
Right, okay,
which may have been the most confusing thing right here because we're going to block him. So maybe we should have left him unblocked in the end and the visual connection with who he's reading.
Run it last time.
We're going to block him, and him, which means there is nobody to read.
Yeah.
And he should have just given the ball. You're exactly right. It really, up the middle, one of them should just go on and probably should just give it. Tough break for Auburn. Artis-Payne looked like he had the ball, but in the scrum, he lost it.
That's what it is, too. It's a scrum.
He lost it in the scrum. So Auburn loses the football game. Obviously, that was a big play in the game. As Auburn loses that fumble, then goes on and loses the next one that was crazy as well, and that was pretty self-explanatory. Just some confusion and a bad snap. And Reese has had an unbelievable career, and he's a great player. And him and Nick, I mean, this stuff is rare. It's shocking to see.
And it should have never come down to those guys. I mean, it
absolutely.
was all about the hole they had to climb out of, and they did an outstanding job of even putting themselves in position to win that football game.
When we get back, we're going to talk about Auburn and Georgia, Deep South's oldest rivalry. When we get back on Auburn Intel. Auburn has no time to dwell on what could have been against Texas A&M as they prepare to travel to Georgia for the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Todd Gurley returns to a Bulldogs offense that is fresh off scoring 63 points on the road at Kentucky, while Auburn's defense attempts to find answers after surrendering 145 points in the last 4 games. Auburn leads the all-time series against Georgia 55-54-8 and will play at Georgia for the first time since 2011. How do they do it? How do you bounce back? I guess it's good that you got Georgia. Georgia and Alabama. That's a great way to bounce back. But
that's the only way you do bounce back.
Absolutely.
Confidence has got to be hurting them a little
There's some
bit.
innate emotions that go with this game.
Yeah.
And actually, history says playing at Georgia has been kind to us historically.
I had a team my freshman year that was in the same scenario. We lost to a Mississippi State squad that we should have beaten.
What year was that?
20 to
97?
nothing, 97. We had to finish with Georgia and Alabama. Had to go into Athens to a team that was better than us, at least according to the polls, and won the football game after laying an egg against Mississippi State. So we'll see if this team can do something like that, because I actually think the matchup is more favorable this week than it was last week.
Oh, yeah.
And people will look at that and say, well, he's just saying that because he wants Auburn to win. Well, of course I do. But look what Texas A&M did. I mean, they took advantage of our weak areas. What is Georgia going to do? They're going to try and run the football. That's the one thing defensively that we've been able to do. Plus, they're going to come in with a guy that hasn't played for 4 or 5 weeks, and that's going to disrupt a little bit of what their chemistry's been. So we'll just see how it plays out. But I like the matchup. I like Nick Marshall going back in Athens as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd expect him to play well. That's going to be interesting. You got Jeremy Pruitt, who obviously was at Florida State when the BCS championship game. Now he's at Georgia. He's going to have a pretty good. Listening to Mark Richt talk about it, they've got an idea of what to do in terms of bring guys up on the perimeter, fill the gaps, be aggressive. They're going to have to take shots deep. I don't think Artis Payne's going to be funneled in right in here. They're not going to let Nick get outside. They're going to have to hit some balls downfield, but it'll be a challenge.
We'll go back to sort of a Kansas State. I'm guessing we're going to get sort of a Kansas State game plan for
defensively.
Yeah, defensively.
Georgia, right.
Yeah. And Georgia doesn't have the defensive linemen that they've had that could dominate really an offensive line. So I think for us it's whoever runs the ball and stops the run best. And I think both sides are pretty equally matched that way, to be honest with you. I think it's kicking game turnovers, because I think they got a great playmaker coming back. We got a great playmaker.
Boy.
And
two best rushing offenses in the league.
Yeah, I mean but still it's going to be those big plays down the field too. I mean, you don't ever think that it's just a pound them game. I mean, it's got to be somebody's got to catch the ball down the field.
It is amazing though to watch Gus Malzahn and Jeremy Pruitt face off again.
Yeah.
I mean, these are two guys that were in high school ranks less than a decade ago.
Yeah.
Jeremy Pruitt down the road in Hoover at your alma mater. And I just think that Coach Malzahn can devise a scheme. He can look back at what Florida State had done to him. I mean, this offense is really hitting on all cylinders. Unless they stop themselves, there aren't many defenses that are doing things to stop them right now.
No.
I don't think Georgia will be any different.
I would agree.
They're going to try to absorb our offensive line. When I say Kansas
Right.
State, what does that mean? Absorb the offensive lineman, don't get them to the second level, and get
Yeah.
all your second level players. Very fast reads in the perimeter, attacking the run, and free your linebackers to come inside out on the ball. I mean, it's a good plan.
How does Auburn's defense get it together? Because Georgia takes shots now every year. I mean, I don't know the last time Auburn held Georgia under 30 points. They've got a streak here. If you go back and look, they're scoring 30 on Auburn every single year. I'd have to go back to maybe 2000 and I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know the last time Auburn held them in check from a defensive standpoint. It's been a while,
Well,
and then this defense is reeling now.
This is a first to 40 game.
Yeah,
30
it's
is not
another one. So it's another
yeah.
one. So you don't think
No.
Auburn's
30 doesn't-
defense
30
turns
doesn't
around?
resonate. No.
Yeah.
But
First to 40.
But like any game, you got to go in and try to make them one-dimensional. I mean, you've got to try to shut down the run, as tough as that may seem.
It's gonna be tough.
And then put the quarterback in situations where it's an obvious passing situation. And like Coach said earlier, we got to learn to play zone. We're just not good enough playing man-to-man defense. Receivers have changed a lot over the last couple of years. And every team's got some big body guys that are physical and can flat out run. And we just don't match up well with that right now because we don't get a pass rush. We can't cover them that long. So we got to learn to play good, consistent zone if we're going to be good defensively.
We've lost the knack for playing zone. When you play zone, you get a feel for routes and you match and run with routes. And we go to spots and wherever that route is, it just doesn't, we don't match the routes that are coming at us. But that's the thing that you do by repetition and repetition and repetition and repetition. And we're getting more reps at man coverage than we are at zone, and for that reason, we look bad in zone right now.
But even when we're in man-to-man coverage, we don't disguise anything.
Yeah, that's the
we
other thing.
walk up and show you exactly
Right.
what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the most. We're giving away the biggest advantage we have as a defense is concealment.
And that's
pre-snap
what really
disguise.
aided the A&M quarterback more than anything.
Yeah,
Was
absolutely.
he had clear pictures all the time, and
Right.
I just think that it's maturity at safety
Yeah.
more than anything else. With Whitehead not being there, I think we took a step back in terms of having a vocal leader, because all that has to be communicated and coordinated.
Yeah.
Well, he's there now.
Well,
Yeah.
real quick before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, because secondary-wise, from what I understand, they run a lot of combination, where a lot of times Mincy's in a man, but the other guys are in a zone. Could that cause problems? Is that something that if somebody runs a certain route, it just throws everything off? What are the challenges in that?
Yeah, it can certainly cause problems because he's got to be able to run with guys. He's got to be able to have a pass rush. He can't cover a guy for 5 seconds or for 10 seconds. I mean, that's just not the way it works. You give a quarterback enough time, he's going to be able to defeat any zone and any man. But we just got to, especially when you go back to last week, a new quarterback, toy with that guy. Show him things he's never seen. Make him think. Yeah. Don't let him just sit back there and play pitch and catch. And that's what we can't do
I
this
think we
week.
thought we could blitz him and get to him. We couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. I think you're right. I think it's going to be the same thing both ways. Both teams are going to try to limit the run.
Right.
Contain it the best you can. Both teams are going to get their yards rushing, and it's which quarterback makes the plays. Does Nick make the plays downfield without Duke? Can Auburn? I mean, Georgia takes their shots. Don't give up the big plays down the field. It's going to be really interesting. When we get back, it's closing time on Auburn Intel. Welcome back into Auburn Intel. This is closing time, our final opinions of the night, and Rob's going to kick us off tonight.
Georgia week is an emotional week for many guys. Any given year, roughly a quarter to a third of the Auburn roster hails from the Peach State and loathe the Bulldogs fiercely. When I played, it became a mutual promise. The Georgia guys would say, "You play your heart out for me this week, I'll do the same for you against Bama." My roommate at Auburn, Whit Smith, was a Georgia boy from Crisp County. He knew nothing of the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, its history, its legends, but knew everything about the Georgia Bulldogs. I can remember the meaning this game had to guys like Takeo Spikes, Hicks Poore, Ben Leard, Brad Ware, Dontarius Thomas. It was the highlight of their Auburn careers, the reason most of them came to Auburn in the first place. They wanted this game more than any other, hands down, including the Iron Bowl. Because of that roster disparity, Auburn having more guys from Georgia as opposed to Georgia players from Alabama, this rivalry means more to the Auburn players. Our Texas A&M performance made me question our motivation, our emotion, our mindset. Playing in Athens should remedy that despondency. And an Auburn team playing with a purpose has yet to be defeated this season by an opponent. Auburn's 2 losses have come from Auburn defeating itself.
I'd like to make mention about what has been, in my opinion, a decline in focus. The mistakes that are being made, if they're missed tackles, if they're fumbles, if they're penalties, if they're not protecting a field goal, their attention to an area of detail. These are not give-up plays. They're plays that don't just get executed. And execution is still about the details of getting ready to play. And at this time, I think our coaches have to look back at what we've got to do to get both the emotion and the focus of these players back to fundamentals. So my point is a little less game plan, a little more focus on fundamentals and emotions.
My colleague at AuburnUndercover.com, Philip Marshall, raised the point on Monday, and it's a good one. Gus Malzahn, for the first time as head coach at Auburn, halfway through his second season, will face some questions on the defensive side of the ball when this season is finished. For the second year in a row, the Tigers' defense has given up yards and points at a level not consistent with a championship caliber team. Auburn's defensive struggles aren't relegated to just this year. Since 2009, Auburn's defense has not been among the SEC's best, not even close. Malzahn's offense doesn't help things. A fast-paced offense doesn't go hand in hand with a dominant defense most of the time. Having said that, bad tackling, missed assignments, jumping off sides, those are correctable mistakes that aren't being corrected right now. Maybe Auburn's defense will turn it around in the final 3 games, maybe not. Regardless, Malzahn and Ellis Johnson will face some hard questions when the season ends about the direction of this defense for the immediate future. Guys, what do you think? You agree?
Yeah, I
agree.
do. It's going to be an interesting offseason to see how they attack that.
Yeah, and it's been a problem for a lot of years, so they're going to have to, figure something out. Ellis isn't going anywhere, but Something got to change.
One thing is what's the difference between the first half and the second half? I mean, they scored 2 field goals the second half.
Yeah.
And if you look at what's happening on offense, you've got every coach on the offensive staff is downstairs. That whole thing is run around Gus on the sidelines. On the other side, all the brain power and the adjustments are happening at halftime. And I think maybe the slow starts have to do with what our sideline organization is. And I think maybe when you say we've got to rethink some things, I don't know if that's it or not. But I think that's where you got to go. Okay, how are we making adjustments? How are we communicating during the game? They just got to go back and rethink everything. They'll get it right.
Well, we'll see if Auburn can come out against Georgia and look good in the first half and not just the second half. Big game in Athens, ESPN, 7:45 p.m. Eastern on Saturday night. Auburn and Georgia. I'll be there. We'll be here next week to break it all down on Auburn Intel. Thanks for joining us.
War Eagle.